we've already started in prayer, but I found a prayer. Well, I didn't find it. It came to me this morning on this Passover, this Passion Sunday, Palm Sunday. It's on a thing called Pause and Pray, which comes through the Franciscan media. Just little short things each day. And I think it's kind of maybe a nice way to start, and we'll see the connection it has within the Beatitudes sometime during this day as well. And just real quickly, everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Great.
Yes. Very nice.
Just making sure. Good deal. And so let's also start with this little thing. It's a little reflection. It starts off with. It says, Jesus came to earth, pitched his tent, and dwelt among us. He knew every single human experience and emotion except sin. Most especially, Jesus knows what it is to suffer. His passion and death revealed to us that God can use anything, even the greatest evil and suffering, for a redemptive purpose. Pray. Jesus, you often remind your disciples that they would know suffering in this life. Teach me that the suffering I will encounter is never forgotten or overlooked by you. Draw me close to your sacred heart, and in that embrace, give me hope and courage amid the difficulties. Amen.
Amen.
So the Beatitudes, is it really a Franciscan way of living? Is this what we are all about? During the discussion too, if there's a comment, you want to say something, I would hope that you'd be able to do that. I think we can do that in a polite, good way, that if some kind of question comes up. My hope is to take us through the Beatitudes one by one and kind of really open them up in a kind of scriptural sense and then a Franciscan sense as well, tying those two together. So as you see in our Rule 14, it says, trusting in the Father, Christ chose for himself and his mother a poor, humble life, even though he valued created things attentively and lovingly. So let us, the secular Franciscans, seek a proper spirit of detachment from temporal goods by simplifying our own material needs. Let us be mindful that according to the gospel, we are stewards of the goods received for the benefit of God's children. Thus, in the spirit of the Beatitudes, and as pilgrims, strangers on the way to the house of the Father, we should strive to purify our hearts from every tendency and yearning for possession and power. Notice it did not say, thus, in the spirit of the commandments, or in the spirit of the laws of the Old Testament. It chooses the Beatitudes. And I thought that was just kind of interesting. It could have said those things, and those are both good things as well. But as Franciscans, we choose this sense of Beatitudes, a beautiful sense of who we are and what we are about. We'll see as in many of the rules, Beatitudes truly come across and help us to form our lives. Beatitudes, there's oh shoot, I didn't change that Greek word. The Greek word for Beatitudes is happy or blessed. This is interesting because we think of that, blessed or happy. Happy are they who mourn, or happy those that are blessed are those who mourn. And what this really is, it's not an emotion. Even for Francis, when he talked about what perfect joy is. Joy is, it's not the emotion. Oh, I'm happy, or it's a joy. It's a thing within. It's like a joy that sees us through our pain. Nothing can take that away. It's something within us that we have that's completely independent of all the chances or the changes of our life. That's what we're talking about when they talk about blessed. It's just a quality within that things can happen around us, but we still know we're blessed. I remember saying that and just learned that from someone I met at a store. How are you? And he says, I'm blessed. It's a quality. It's just recognizing that I have God within. And the rest that happens that day, this happens that day. In the Jewish tradition, a blessed person was either commended for something that a path that they were walking, a path of life, or a promise for future consolation. Blessed will you be, in a way. And it's interesting to read that in the Old Testament, there are actually 45 Beatitudes. Most of them are found in the Psalms and in the Book of Wisdom. They say, blessed are those who delight in God's law. Blessed are those who take refuge in the Lord, or blessed those who trust in him. Get all qualities about people's lives. And those who have those things, again, the world can change around them, but they remain focused on the thing of God, which allows them to be blessed. Today, though, we're going to look at the 8 Beatitudes of Matthew, which announce blessings that begin to be experienced now, and will be fully realized in the heavenly kingdom. But then I got to ask that, when's the heavenly kingdom? Is that not now? And so looking at number 2, now or in the future, it's interesting if you look at verse 1 at the very top, and it might be covered, it might be open, you're blessed are the poor in spirit. And underneath it says what? Theirs is the kingdom of heaven. It doesn't say there will be, as the other ones look like they do, or shall be, but theirs is. And then if you look at the last verse, the same thing. For theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Is a present. It's not just this distant future. It's not going to happen down the road. And notice it's kind of sandwiched. That's the word sandwich in there. It's the top bun and the bottom bun, and everything in the middle goes with it. So it's, in a way, what it's trying to say is that all of this can be experienced today. It's in the now. It's not something that we will have, and yet will be fulfilled more fully in the time to come. But yet we can experience now. We can taste the kingdom now, because the kingdom is made present through Christ's ministry. Therefore, in our ministry, which we hopefully model after Christ, we too then bring the kingdom here. In the very first psalm, in the very first verse of the psalm, in the Hebrew translation, it says, "Oh, the blessedness of the man who walks in the way of the Lord." It's an exclamation. In other words, all these really are exclamations that congratulate what is right now. And we look at number 3, a reversal of values. It's, because the idea of blessedness in the time, I think as people understood it, and we even today, we hear, oh, we're blessed, or God bless America, or all those kind of things that we say. It's in good fortune. Those people have things good. Oh, gee, he's blessed. Look how good he's got it. But Christ is going to take these Beatitudes and just turn them right around. Just almost a reversal of what people thought the blessed would be, of what we think blessed would be. And it's going to take it and just reverse all of that about. To focus on what? On the poor, on the vulnerable, on the mourning, the meek, the hungry, the persecuted. These are the ones who are advantaged. These are the ones that God is looking favorably upon. Not so much, oh, I won the lottery or this or that. It's when we're blessed because of the sense of being poor, being vulnerable, being in mourning, being persecuted, being hungry. Therefore, Jesus challenges his followers to see life from God's viewpoint, not the world's. For the world will tell us we're blessed when we have things. But they are, when they live by God's standards, they are truly in a fortunate state of life, no matter what circumstance may be. It doesn't matter what's going on in their life, what's going on around them. In these Beatitudes, we can find a blessing. We can find a richness. We can find truly an image of Christ. Because these things bring a glimmer of joy and hope of the heavenly kingdom into the afflictions of the present world. And remember, we talked about, Francis's perfect joy. It wasn't a feeling. It's just a sense of, here he was being afflicted. Here he was even being shunned at the door, cold and hurting. But in that affliction, he was able to find a joy. He was able to find, quote, a blessing, if you may, being happy. But again, not an emotion, but a state of being of who he is. In the fourth point, it's a portrait of Jesus' own life. This, if you want to see a picture of Jesus, read the Beatitudes. As Pope Benedict XVI, he wrote, the Beatitudes display the mystery of Christ himself, and they call us in communion with him. So they're not just out there as something just to see, oh, here's a picture of Christ, but also a calling to us to do the same, to imitate, as we say. Another scholar, he wrote about the Beatitudes. He says the Beatitudes was the ordination's address to the 12. He sat down on the mountain and he spoke to the 12. It pretty much says, and all the rest of the people got to hear. But it's like he's getting ready to ordain them, to make them, his disciples, his apostles out there. And this is his ordination address. Here's the things, if you're going to do this, here's what you need to expect. Here's what you need to be. Here's who you are. So in other words, if this is a portrait of Jesus, is this not also a photo of St. Francis? Finally, it's radical. This whole reversal, going from the people that had everything to know the people that are poor, these are the blessed ones. But even in these blessed, these sayings, as we look at the Greek and the Hebrew words, we're going to find how radical these things are. I mean, what is it to mourn? What is it to be hungry? What does pure of heart truly mean? And the words that Jesus uses, the words that we have through the scriptures, are very powerful. And as we open these up more so, we'll find that. All right. Any questions or thoughts at this time?
There was a question that came in on the chat, but remember everybody's muted.
Okay. Is it, I can't see the chat.
Yeah, so I have a question, and I'm the one who wrote the chat. So, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. I would assume that there are 3 or 4 ways in which to translate poor in spirit versus poor in heart.
Each one, we'll get into each one as we do this right now.
Okay, never mind.
We're going to take each one at a time. You got it.
Okay, cool.
Good. Okay, any other thoughts before we go? I guess you can chat, and then Amy, if you want to throw what the chat is, that'd be great. Okay.
Okay.
It's hard because I can't see anybody. I'm just looking at my screen. All right, let's go forward. So blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. In the Greek word for the poor is ptochos, which is really absolute and abject poverty. Someone who was poor, nothing. We see in the Old Testament, the ptochos was the oppressed. It's those who had a particular need of God's help. They didn't know what else to do. Because again, in the Old Testament times, God did everything for us. I mean, if it rained, that was God that did that. It wasn't, because the air pressure moved up and the storm came and different winds pushed the rain in. No, God did everything. If your horse died, that was God that did the horse. If you had a new horse being born or a cow being born, it was God who made that happen. So for the oppressed, they relied on that. Okay, if God's doing it all, I rely totally on God doing it for me. I don't know what else I can do. I'm totally poor. Yet poor in spirit, it's not so much the material poverty, even though that's part of it, but there's an emphasis on one's inner attitude. that there's a sense that I have nothing, and so I must rely on another. It's much like a baby. Your Rebecca, your goats. You have to feed your goats, and you have to make milk 4 times a day, and all those kind of things. It relies totally on you. Without you, it's been rejected. So without you, it would die. And this is the inner attitude that we're looking at here of being poor in spirit. I need another to sustain me. I need another to drive me, to move me, to excite me, to help me. It's those that recognize that God's the only one who can help them. That, again, knowing that God's doing all things, I rely on him to make the rain. I rely on him to give me a new cow or prosperous wheat in the field, whatever it may be. But I rely on knowing he's the one that can do it for me. And they trust that God will work on their behalf. That God does see them, that God has not abandoned them, that God will continue to walk with them. This is the poor in spirit. It's, I guess in a way, it's an emptying of our own self, in a way, kind of being destitute. Searching for a sense that if I empty myself, then I know that only God can fill that. I know I have the attitude, and I mentioned this the other day on one of the Stations of the Cross, that I got the cross. Simon, I don't need you. And yet, even Christ, I need another. And in a way, pointing to us that we need help. And where do we rely for that help? But we rely on that help from God. Okay. And it says there again, theirs is the kingdom. Finding faith in the midst of poverty, of affliction, of suffering. When we do that, this is where we, how do we say this? This is where we find God present, or wish to find God present. When we're poor in spirit, again, when we're rich in spirit, we don't need him. Yet when we're poor in spirit, there's a need and relying, knowing, okay, you are here. You have not abandoned us. And this is enough. Christ is enough. I love that little line that we hear, be still and know that I am God. To rely the sense that, okay, God, you're enough for me, and I rely on you. In our journey books, there's a chapter with the Beatitudes, and it talks about the world is full of creation for our use. But the idea behind the Franciscan life is that we don't cling to those things. We see them as gifts, but they're not my gifts. They're given to me, but not mine to hold alone. The idea is that we should to share those things, not to cling to them so tightly that they dedicate the way of my life. When we don't cling, when we use beautifully, as Francis did, the gifts that were around him, then we're open to God's call, God's way of doing things. Blessed are the poor in spirit. In this idea of being poor, we experience a sense of the kingdom, because what's the kingdom of heaven but the presence of God? In being poor, we allow that presence of God to be more of our lives, in our direction. What does he want for us, rather than what do we want for ourselves? Blessed are they who mourn, for they will be comforted. Mourning. The Greek used this word as one who's mourning the death of someone so close. I mean, imagine the people that died in Atlanta, the people who were shot in Atlanta, the people who were shot in Colorado. Imagine those families. One day, everything's fine. The next day, they're dead. This is the mourning that the Greek is using, that's translated. It's not just, oh, I'm sad. Oh, I'm mourning a little bit. It's that deep, deep mourning, the deep, deep sorrow, maybe a better word, of someone who's gone. And so we can see the strength that Jesus uses in this word. Blessed are those who mourn, those who have gone through such suffering, such persecution, such horrific things, and they will be comforted. So what are we mourning? What are we sorrowing? Again, I kind of like that word almost better. Yes, many of us, I think most of us, have experienced death in someone close. And it's interesting, it's these times that I find people either drawn to God or drawn away from God when someone dies. There's either a blame or there's a sense, okay, God, you took care of it and we're okay with this. And there's a sense of drawing closer to God in someone who's passed away. So it can be a sense of drawing to God. Another thing that we mourn or sorrowful for is the sufferings of the world. The reality of what's going on, war, plagues, injustices, so many things that happen in our world. And is it affecting our hearts? Are we mourning? Are we sorrowing? Or is it just, it's on TV, it doesn't affect me? And the last one too, then at mourning, are those who mourn for their own sins and unworthiness. Is there a sense of looking inward a little bit and realizing this is something I have and I don't like it, and it's making me mourn, I guess, or sorrow or saddened that this is still part of my life, my sin that I continue to hold on to. See, okay, there's times in our world that we cannot change the circumstances around us, yes, but we can resist these wrongs by our mourning them. In other words, by our being more aware of those, the more we become aware, the more we do wish to mourn, because it is sad. Again, it's so easy to turn the TV on and off, and when we don't like something, we can turn it off or mute it. But to know more the realities of what is happening, and then grieving over them, that this makes us upset. To come into the room and watch the news, and all of a sudden we see 10 more people killed, or the ones again in Atlanta who kind of seem to be forgotten already. But those who've lost their lives. But does that really affect us, or well, let's just go make dinner, forget about it? Do it affect us enough to where we want to make a change? But yet also within this morning, do we have the confidence that God will make all things right? And God does make all things right, and yet uses his people to do that. I guess again, the question to ask, are there things in this world that makes us mourn? Are there injustices that rip our hearts out? We cannot stand because we hurt so bad. We mourn so bad for these things. Are there things within us, upon our own inner reflection, that this morning makes us say, enough, that's it, we're done. We need to change. I have to change. We good to go on? Okay. Blessed are they who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the land. The word meek is praus. It's kind of the middle of two extremes. That's the first kind of definition. In other words, it's not being overly angry. It's not being indifferent. It's kind of that middle area. Not being so joyful that no one can touch you, or so sad that no one wants to touch you. It's that middle area. And it's interesting too, it's this word praos also refers to the domesticated animal. Those that were obedient to their masters. Masters said come, and the dog or whatever would come, or the horse, which was domesticated. So it's this idea of being that servant of the animal that serves the human, and also humility. For without humility, we can not truly love. But yet meek today, as it's understood today, is, oh, that person's meek, he's spineless, he's subservient, he's ineffective. And this is the hard thing. So when people see this, blessed are the meek, I think that's what they think today. Blessed are those who just don't do anything, who don't stand up for things, but just they're on the side. We see quoted in Psalm 31. It's almost the same as this beatitude. But the meek will inherit the land. Here Jesus is pointed to those who are in the middle of two things. Those who are obedient to him, those who do things with humility. So those who patiently wait on the Lord amid the afflictions and refrain in responding in anger or force on those who wrong them. In other words, a meek person is a person who relies on God, not on his own strength to set things right. It's not like, okay, God, you do it for me, I'm gonna step back. But it's God's strength from within me that allows me then to do something with someone else. Jesus' words regarding this anger or retaliation show what it means to be meek. In Matthew, a little bit later in this chapter, he says, an eye for an eye. No. It's to love the enemy, to do good to those who persecute you. But it's doing something. It's not just sitting back. In this word meek, in the journey book, it talks about individuals that have the strength to see what needs to be done, and they actually do it. It's where we can touch people's lives, but without arrogance, without dominance. So we see something that needs to be done, and then we go towards them to do it. But again, not being superior or not being above, but using acceptance as a place to start, as a place to begin. We retain the dignity of the person that we're working with. This is a meek person, not a spineless person, but someone who is an understanding of another. When it says they will inherit the land, the idea of the land, they'll inherit the kingdom. And the kingdom, in other words, is the kingdom of heaven, which can be seen as far away and yet right here, right now. I'll tell you right now, this is the bizarre thing for me doing this on Zoom, is I really have no idea what your reactions are, who's sleeping out there or what. But I guess I could keep going. Any things till this time, Amy?
I don't see any chats. You're
Okay.
doing great, Pat. You're awesome.
Well, let's hope God's good. All right, so blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the land. Blessed are they who hunger and thirst for righteousness. They will be satisfied. And I think of this question, do we really know what it's like to be hungry? I mean, starving. I mean, we say it, oh, I'm starving. We just had food like 6 hours ago, whatever it may be. Oh, I gotta have something right now. I've got a nice big cinnamon bun in front of me. It's like, oh, I'm starving, I'd have some more. I'm not. I mean, to be starving, the common laborers, they had meat once a week. We have it almost every single day if we're not vegetarian or vegans, but we almost have it all the time. But they could only eat it once a week. That's all was available to them. Fresh water wasn't easy to come by. Hunger and thirst was a reality for people today. So imagine if you're not a laborer. If you're a laborer, you can eat it. But if you're not a laborer, the sense of being hungry. We think of people hungry in this world today, homeless or people in other countries who is not being fed, or food's even being taken away from them or protected from them because of government control. And they're not getting the food. These are people who hunger, they thirst. Being parched. Maybe, Amy, I'm sorry to pick on you, but I think in last year we did the Station of the Cross. There was a time where Amy was like, I got to have something. I need electrolytes. I need something beyond what I have. And finally, when she had those, the energy came back. But any experience where we just are parched, this is the hunger that Jesus is talking about. It's not just, oh, I feel hungry right now. It's that starving. I got to have this. I have to have it or I die. So the person who hungers and thirsts for righteousness longs for God's saving action. He seeks to do God's will with the intensity of one starving for food or dying of thirst. In other words, I got to see God's action in this world. I got to see God's will doing in this world. I can't just sit around and let it pass me. It refers to those who are not content with the ways things are and refuse to stifle the restlessness of the heart that points us to something greater. as again for Benedict the 16th. I'm not content with how the world is. It must be better. And it's in this movement, I think it's when we find this moving us, when we find this hunger and thirst, this drive, then we find ourselves being filled because there's plenty to feed us out there. I think the invitation is to be in the forefront of promoting justice. I mean, think of how often have you been even asked to write your congressman? And have you? How often have you been asked to call your congressman on a bill coming up? And not right now. And then it gets put off. Do we even know what's going on in our own city? Do we know what's going on in the mayor's office or within our city council? Are we aware of those things? And I'm at fault for this. I remember talking to Christine when she was part of us. I want to find out what's going on. And yet, have I been Tuesday to a meeting? Not for years. But to know what's going on with it in our own, that I may hunger and thirst for justice. In the Journey book, we see that we hunger and thirst, the faithful are to build a world where all people are treated with dignity. Solanus Casey, he's quoted as saying, only lovers of justice and truth can possess the kingdom of heaven. And to be children of God, we too then must be lovers of justice and truth. And if we love justice and truth, then we must hunger because it's not happening within our world today. Are we starving for justice? Or is it just, oh, it's nice to see that on TV and move on? And this is Jesus saying to his disciples, here's where I want you to be. I'm ordaining you as his apostles. This is my speech to you. This is what I look for you to be this way. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. In mercy, the Hebrew word is hesed. It's a hard word to define. It doesn't have a true, solid meaning. It's more of an idea or something. But as I was reading, it has an inner desire to get inside the other person's skin, that we may see with their eyes, and we may think what they think, we feel what they feel with them, and which then manifests itself in an outward action of kindness and generosity towards them. So a hesed to another is to be in touch with that other person. How easy is it for us to throw judgment when we see another? Maybe by what they wear, their hairstyle, got color, purple hair, whatever it may be, and oh my gosh, look at them. But to be merciful is not to have that judgment, but to see what's going on with them. There's so much division already. Oh, they're a Democrat. Oh my gosh, they're Republican. Oh, they're this, they're that. We throw that on as opposed to tell me about yourself. To, in a way, Franciscan way, to enter into dialogue, an openness to listen. It also translates as God's loving kindness, mercy. It's God's loving kindness to me. But God knows me because he's been in my skin. And therefore, he's able to share that with me. And I, too, to receive that from him. Pope Francis writes that mercy towards a human life is a state of need. Mercy towards a human life in a state of need, I should say, in a state of need, is the true face of love. When we show mercy towards another, this is where we see the face of Christ. This is where the kingdom of heaven is not to be, but is, and we experience it today. It's in this reciprocating action throughout Matthew's gospel. To forget, you forgive, you will be forgiven. You give, it will be given to you. Over and over again throughout it, he has lines like this. Be merciful, you will be shown mercy. I remember in the LA Congress, I think one of the most moving talks was from a talk on homosexuality. And the man was saying, he says, you look at me and you see me. He says, step behind me and see what I see. Step behind me and watch with me. That's merciful. The opposite, when I stand to look at, is judgment. That was a revelation to me. Francis and Claire, this was their life in the lives of the lepers, in the lives of the poor, in the need, those who came to Claire over and over for their sickness or whatever, for healing. She got into their skin to see what they could see, feel what they felt. Christ was the same as he walked in the people that came to him, moved with compassion, moved with pity, we often hear, especially in Mark's gospel. Moved with mercy. He was able to touch their lives. Again, in our journey book, we remind us that no matter how often someone fails or hurts us, our work, our lives as Franciscans, is to offer them a hand of mercy. This is who we are. We are merciful people. This is who we are called to be. So what Francis, what Claire did in their lives, we will do this in ours, which is to show mercy. For this is how we experience the kingdom. It's not far away. It is here. It's here each time we see it, mercy. One of my own personal reflections is that I've been struggling over and over with is, how do I see the face of God in the poor? I want to look at them and see, oh, I see Jesus. It's not that I see the person of Jesus, it's in the action that I'm now discovering is. It's in that suffering that I'm actually seeing the face of Christ, in his suffering, or in his love, or in his compassion. But it's seeing that in the other. It's seeing that in those, the poor, the oppressed, all these. And it's when I show mercy that I experience the face of Christ. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the clean of heart, for they will see God. In the times of Jesus, the heart was the center of a person's life. We hear often about blood. Blood is the life in the sense when blood is out, they're dying. But it's the person's emotions, it's their intellect, but especially it's their will, it's their decisions they make. The heart is that center. In Deuteronomy, we see, love the Lord your God with your whole heart. In other words, with all of me, with the center of me. This is where I love the Lord. And that's without mixed motives. Oh, I love God because he's going to give me something back. No, that's a different motive. I love God because it's the center of my being. It's what God is asking, to love him with the center of my being. So it's not only this outward appearance, and we see that in the scriptures often with the Pharisees. They look good, they're showing themselves well. Look, I pray this, I do all these things. But as Christ even said to them, no, it's inside the cup that matters. Because it's the inside that moves the outside. It's the center, it's this heart that moves who we are. So this beatitude asks us to examine our motives. Why do we do what we do? The clean of heart it's or they call it a pure of heart sometimes, pure of heart. It allows us to see clearly. It's like the cataracts are gone. I had cataract surgery in one eye, and all of a sudden things are like white. It's clean. Oh, it's just what a difference it was. And maybe some of you have had the same experience. We don't have glaucoma anymore. It's taken from our eyes. We see clearly. Therefore, if we see clearly, then we're not deceived by artificiality. We're not deceived by lies or the tools that other people use to hide their inner lives from themselves. We actually see things how they are. A clean heart helps us to see the presence of God around us, not clouded by the things that happen in our lives. Yes, blessed are the clean heart. When I see so clearly, there is a joy within me that anything else can happen around, but I see. And you can still see the presence of God in this. So even through the afflictions or the suffering, or whatever it may be, I can see clearly because God is here. Francis, what a clean heart he must have had. To see it through all of creation, my brother, my sister, just to come like, oh, let's throw these nice words out there. But here is his beatitude, one of the many beatitudes, to see clearly that all creation is family, that I'm related to all of this. How wonderful that is. Blessed are the clean of heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Shalom, what a beautiful Jewish word we hear often, which is said to another. You say shalom to another, not wishing the absence of evil for them, no, but wishing the highest good to be with that other person. We are peacemakers, not just lovers. Oh, we love peace. No, makers. In other words, that we work for peace and justice. We're the ones who make it happen. So we can look into ourselves. How are we making peace inwardly? Because it has to start here. It has to start within. And the Jewish rabbis, they held that the highest task which a person can perform is to establish right relationships between one another. So once from within first me, then to another, that we make right relationships. We make peace with one another. I think kids, and I'm looking at this picture, what a beautiful image. You know, and one can say to another something insulting, and within minutes they're back together playing as if nothing had happened. The ease of forgiveness is part of that peacemaking. What does it mean to be in right relationship with all of creation? The reality is there is conflict in our world. In Article 19 of our rule, we hear that we are the bearers of peace, which must be built up unceasingly. That we are peacemakers. And we have to work to make peace. It's a both and solution, not an either or. How do we work it together? The reality is that peacemakers have to get in the middle of a conflict, in the middle of those things, and that's uncomfortable. I don't like to be there. But to be in the midst of that, and using the other Beatitudes as well to help guide me, how do I help to bring the peace? How do I help to bring justice? Blessed are they who are persecuted for the sake of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. How far is one willing to go to protect their faith, to speak up for what's right? In the Old Testament, it refers often to the prophets in this way. They were persecuted, or many of the martyrs who died for the Torah, Maccabees. What's the reward when one stands up for another and triumphs? I mean, think of the times that you have stood up for someone else and it worked. What is that reward? Is that not the kingdom of heaven? Is that not a right relationship between two people that just brings an incredible joy that, again, that nothing can take away? Not that emotion, but just that sense that this is good. This is right. See, in this beatitude, Jesus does not leave any doubt of what it's going to be like to follow him. There's going to be a lot of days that are going to be like Calvary. There's a lot of days when we stand up for things that are right, that we will get persecuted, we will be thrown down, we will be insulted. But this is the kingdom. This is where it's at. What's it like being Franciscan in our world today? Is it easy? Is it simple? I say my prayers, I'm done. What's it like being Franciscan in our city, in your church, in your home? Finally, it ends with this. Blessed are you when they insult you. Sorry for my misspellings. They insult you and persecute you and utter every kind of evil against you falsely because of me. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward will be great in heaven. There's two very important aspects of this final beatitude. One, that these are not just general principles to live one's life by, but particular instructions for the committed followers of Christ. Notice that theirs is the kingdom, is now changed to you, for your reward. Rejoice and be glad for you. Persecute you, utter every kind of evil against you. This is now becoming very personal to us. Christ wants this relationship between you and him. And also, when Jesus first spoke to those being persecuted, it was for righteousness. That was the one before this, persecuted for righteousness' sake. But now he's changed us because of me. In other words, this final verse makes all the Beatitudes about being Christ-centered. Obedience to God's law is now associated now with obedience to Christ. This would be seen as blasphemous if he were not the Son of God. But it's about being loyal to Christ himself. In other words, the Beatitudes are not merely ethical principles, but they're statements about the authority of Jesus and what it means to place our lives around him. Living the Beatitudes is imitating Jesus' life. Was this not the goal of St. Francis? To imitate. And so in Article 14 of our rule, kind of summing things up a little bit, the secular Franciscans, together with all the people of goodwill, are called to build a more fraternal and evangelical world so that the kingdom of God may be brought about more effectively. The kingdom of God, which is what all these speak about. Mindful that anyone who follows Christ, the perfect human, becomes more of a human themselves. Think of that line. The Beatitudes, the portrait of Christ. The more we follow the Beatitudes, the more we follow Christ, the one who is perfect, we become more that way as well. So let us exercise our responsibilities competently in the Christian spirit of service. And this is how we do this. This is how we live this, with a spirit of service. So the Beatitudes are about making the kingdom here and now, not tomorrow, not at some far off place, but here. Theirs is the kingdom of God. And as we follow and convert our lives using these instructions from Jesus himself, how might we bring the kingdom to others, that they too may experience the mercy and love of God, not for some later time or far off place, but the here and now. So as we enter into Holy Week, the strength that comes from the Beatitudes will help us to follow Christ through the Mount of Olives, in the Praetorium, through the roads of Jerusalem, up to the cross on Calvary, only to lead us to the resurrection, life with God in the fullness. In the portrait of Jesus, again, one of the Beatitudes talked about being in a skin. I was reading this from William Barclay. He says, in Jesus Christ, the most literal sense, God got inside the skin of men. He came as a man. He came seeing things with man's eyes, feeling things with man's feelings, thinking things with man's minds. God knows what our life is like because God came right inside our life. That's just what God did. He came to us, not as a remote, detached, isolated, majestic God, but as a man. The supreme instance of mercy, of Hesed, is the coming of God in Jesus Christ. Here is our portrait. What does our portrait look like? We are the people of the Beatitudes. So we're going to break in small groups. And I'd like you all to write this down right now. Get a piece of paper and a pen. You should hopefully have that with you. Hopefully you all have your rule books, or some of you have your rule books, so that every person somewhere has a rule book. I've got some things to change. And so if you wouldn't mind, please, and you can take everyone off mute now, Amy, if you like. Group 1, if you're in group 1, you're going to focus on the poor in spirit and look at Article 11, not article, Article 11. Group 2, you're going to take the mourn, blessed are those who mourn. Take Article 7, see if how they correlate. Group 3, the meek, Article 12 or 13, or both. Group 4, righteousness. So give them a little time to write these things down. And my hope would be is this kind of open, and we'll maybe take, how much time we got? Well, maybe 10 minutes, I think we'd be fine. Let's do 5 minutes. That's long enough. Just what hit you in this thing, or how do you see the article and this Beatitude tie in together? If you want to share a little bit, but hopefully everyone can share. The group should be fairly small because there's